Christmas is one of those holidays that it just seems it's very infectious, and everybody, for one reason or another, gets very excited about it. Now, I grew up in a home where it was very traditional for us to get presents, and many of you know that experience too. And as a kid, I was not able to wait for Christmas morning to open my gifts, and so for the first couple years of my life, what I learned to do was when I saw the presents, I'd very carefully go to the gift and I would lift up the Scotch tape. And I would take a look to see what I was getting. Well, my mom was a prankster, and we had a good time. We had a relationship. I would scare her to death, and she would prank me. And so it's kind of how we worked. Mother and son, a very happy family. So one year what she did was she had wrapped up a box of underwear for me. And it was a big giant box, and she put it under the tree. And I could not stand the tension of seeing that big box with my name on it, and I fell for it. And I went and I opened it up all excited, who knows what it was going to be, maybe an Evel Knievel motorcycle rider, one of those things. I opened it up, and it was underwear. And I thought, oh, you've got to be kidding. This is horrible. This is the worst Christmas of my life. And on that Christmas morning, I didn't want to get out of bed. I thought, oh, yeah, what am I going to do? There's nothing under there for me. And, my mom and dad, they pulled me out, and made me come sit under the tree. And then she had changed the gifts. She had, put, that Evel Knievel inside that box. And when I opened that up, I thought, oh, you've got to be kidding. I was so happy. And she laughed and laughed. She thought she was the funniest mother in the history of humanity. She was so proud of herself because I couldn't have fallen for it any better than that. But this waiting, that's just a part of Christmas. The gospel says that the last book of the Old Testament, it was written 400 years before Jesus was born. And that was a period of waiting. Not only did the nation of Israel wait thousands of years for Jesus to be born, but especially those last 400 where God went dark, didn't say a word. And the people continued to be faithful in the rituals and the symbols and just waiting. When is God going to speak again? So our faith is all about the waiting. But I'm going to be honest with you, I am a horrible waiter. Well, I don't mean, bring you your food waiter. I mean, I am bad at waiting. In fact, it's not even an issue of waiting. It's an anger issue I have. So anytime that I'm in traffic, or anytime I call customer service, or anytime I'm just waiting in a long line, waiting to be checked out, I have anger issues. And it just boils. So far, I haven't been able to mouth it out. It all, reduces my lifespan. And it's just all inside. I don't like to wait. But I'm not the only one. There's lots of people who don't like to wait. I read a funny survey from Timex. I don't know if a lot of you have Timex watches. There was a day when somebody did. But they did a survey about, how long do people wait for things? And they found some funny results. They found that if you're at a red light and the light turns green and the car in front of you doesn't move forward, on average, we will wait 13 seconds before we blow our horn at them. Now, I know some of you are wondering, where did they take this survey? Doesn't sound anything like, because in San Jose, we wait 2 seconds and then hold our horn for 13 seconds while we move on. That's been my experience here. They found another one, 26 seconds. If you're in a movie theater, it takes you 26 seconds to tell somebody who's talking behind you to shh. 26 seconds. If you're in a place and you're standing and somebody is sitting where you would like to sit and they stand up and vacate that seat and you could now sit there, you will delay 26 seconds before you go and take that place. Isn't that funny? 26 seconds. Here's another strange one. You will wait on a blind date. You will wait 20 minutes for your blind date to show up for the dinner. Yeah, you'll wait, or lunch, whatever it is. You'll wait 20 minutes, not 21, 20 minutes evidently. It's just an average, right? I know that on my first date with my wife, if I had not shown up early, she would have come to her senses and gotten out of there. So I knew I had so I skewed it that way. But on the other end, I would have waited for her for 15 years. So it does go that way too, right? It goes that way. We're going. And another funny one is for Christmas dinner. I don't know how many of you are having Christmas dinner, but the last person to arrive that was invited, you will generally wait on average 20 minutes for that person to arrive. 20 minutes. I would say, again, where do they do these surveys? Doesn't make any sense. Because when I arrive for Christmas dinner, I start eating immediately. And the later the last person is, the more good stuff there is for me to eat as fast as I can. So I appreciate that if I can get there early. So I don't know where they get these things, but it's all about that waiting, isn't it? It's all that waiting that we do. But there's a part of waiting in our lives that is kind of a personal thing too. We always wait for other people to improve. We wait for things to change. We wait for our boss to leave. We wait so many things, but there's an aspect of that really gets under our skin. But there's also that part of us that's a very personal thing. It's easier. It's really not an issue at all if I'm waiting for somebody else. The hard part is when I'm waiting for myself. That's the hard one. That's the one that hurts. That's the one where, you know, if I'm at this age or at this stage in my life where I've accomplished this much, it's saying, well, what took me so long? Why have I done so little? Why haven't I done more? Why haven't I done better? Why haven't I, like other people, ended up in a better place than where I am right now? And we become disgusted. We become disappointed, even ashamed of where we are right now because we think we are waiting too long. It's taking too long. We should have done more. We should have been smarter. We should have taken the opportunity sooner. And we just come at ourselves with an attitude of defeat. When somebody says something nice to us about what we've done, the first thing we hear is, oh, you're saying something nice about me? And we don't say this out loud, we just say it in our heads. I'm going to cut you off right now because you don't know the real me. You don't understand how much further I should have been. You don't understand how I should have done this a long time ago. And if I'd worked harder, I would have more. You'd see more than what I've ended up with. So in reality, what you're saying doesn't mean anything to me because I'm really disappointed with who I am, It's at that moment when somebody comes into relationship with Jesus that everything changes. Because Jesus doesn't come to us with a critical attitude like we come to ourselves. Jesus really comes with an acceptance of where we are right now, regardless of what the solution might be, what the situation might be. Jesus comes with a joy. He comes with that peace, comes with that hope. He comes with that love that we talked about. And he says, okay, here we are. Let's move forward from here. Let's make this the starting point. Let's go now. And we're sitting here going, oh, no, God, no, I'm not ready for you to come in yet. I've got parts of my life, parts of my house that just aren't fit for you. I need to clean them up a little bit more. I need to get ready. I need to do some things. There's parts of my life where it's just not God ready yet. So just give me some time. And Jesus is sitting there with us. He said, well, what am I not able to do in your life? What are you and I not able to help each other out on and get beyond this? What do you have in your life? What do you have in your house that I can't handle? That I can't show you how to get on the other side of that? That's how Jesus is with us when he approaches, how he talks to us. That's how, and if you want to get to the place that God has for you, if you want to reach the potential, if you want to fulfill the purpose and plan that God has for your life, what's the fastest way to get there? To wait. To wait. Isn't that strange? To wait on him to do what he needs to do in your life. Because we are so quick to look at other people and say, you're the reason my life isn't great. But in reality, something happens during this wait where we come to realize it wasn't them, it's really me. And during this wait, something wonderful begins to happen in our hearts and in our lives. It's during the waiting. I want to share with you guys a story from the Bible. It's about a man named Simeon. Now, when Simeon was a young man, he was a very devout, very religious person. He cared deeply about God, the things of God. And God gave him a promise, a very strange promise. Now mind you, this is after 400 years of nothing. Then all of a sudden, things begin to stir. things begin to move around, and different people are all kind of coming together over the birth of Jesus. Then nobody knows that anybody else is in on this. But there's a lot of people moving together by the power of the Spirit. And Simeon is one of those. And a time comes in Simeon's life where for decades and decades now, he's been told that Jesus is going to come, that the Messiah, that the Christ will arrive. Now, one of our questions is, well, okay, so Simeon knew that Jesus was coming. What took God so long to bring Jesus to Simeon? Maybe you're in a situation where God told you, or you have a dream, or you have a hope for something in your own life, and you're like, well, why isn't it now? Why isn't it happening? Well, what's going on? My parents, they're still separated. What's happening? I don't have that job yet. The right person hasn't come into my life. I don't even know what my dream is. I haven't found my life meaning or purpose to my life. When does that happen? When does that happen? And for Simeon, he's watching for the coming of Jesus. And there was a day when a young couple, Joseph and Mary, come walking in. And it's at that moment that Simeon says, look, it's the Messiah. It's the hope of Israel. It's the hope of the world. And my question's always been, how did Simeon know? How did he know of all the babies that were coming to the temple? How did he know? Well, let's open up our Bibles together. In Luke chapter 22, and I'll read from chapter 2, verse 22. I'll read the 10 verses, 11 verses, I suppose, 22 to 32. When the time came for the purification rites required by the law of Moses, Joseph and Mary took him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as it is written in the law of the Lord. Every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons. Now, there was a man in Jerusalem called Simeon who was righteous and devout. He was waiting for the consolation, that means the comforting of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was on him. I'll bring that to your attention. And the Holy Spirit was on him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. Moved by the Spirit, he went into the temple courts. When the parents brought in the child Jesus for him to do for him what the custom of the law required, Simeon took him in his arms and praised God, saying, Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you may now dismiss your servant in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of all nations, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel. And so what we find in Simeon is this eternal hope of the Messiah coming to save the world, to bring salvation, to rescue the world, rescue people like me, people like us from the darkness. And when Jesus shows up, Simeon is saying at this point, it's done. Because Simeon had been waiting his entire life. And as he's getting close to the end of his lifespan, as you get closer there, you can kind of predict when it's not going to be or when it will be. You only go so far. And Simeon's getting awfully close to there. He said, well, when is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And then when it happened, Simeon said, it's happened. I know that it's happened. And I bet he knew because of the many decades of waiting. Because it wasn't waiting as a waste of time. It was waiting as God worked in his heart and in his life, continually changing him. Notice several times how it says the Spirit led, the Spirit guided Simeon. It takes a while to mature to a point in your Christian walk when you are sensitive to the work of the Spirit in your life. Because before you're aware of how the Spirit works in your life, you're aware of your surroundings. And you do this because of your surroundings. And your surroundings tell you that. And what you end up knowing is just what your surroundings tell you. You don't know what comes from God in your life. But after God breaks through into your life and he begins to inform you, and begins to shape you, and he begins to guide you, all of a sudden, now you have a center to your life that informs the world you live in. And you begin to see everything very differently. Not because anything has changed superficially on the outside, but because something on your inside has completely changed, and it enables you to see the world for the reality that it really is, and the way things really are, and the hope, and the peace, and the joy, and the love that you have through Jesus, how that changes absolutely everything, not only through this lifespan, but also your life throughout an eternity with Jesus. That's what the gospel does. Sometimes all we want is things to happen real fast. Why does it take so long? Why does it take so long? When I was a kid, I would ask my mom, Mom, can I have a cookie? She would say, yes, you can have a cookie after supper. Oh, that was the worst news at all. No, why can't I have that? And isn't that how all of us are as parents? We basically want exactly what our children want, but at the right time, Because if timing is off, it ruins everything. It's not good. That's the same way God has with us. And yet we act the same way towards God. God, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you taken care of that? I asked you to fix my marriage. I asked you to fix my finance. I asked you to do this. I asked you to do that. And all along, what's God saying? He's saying, wait. Why? Because he's not done with me yet. He's still at work preparing. He's still at work changing things. I heard the greatest podcast of the week. I don't want to say greatest. I'm sure there are more coming. But I heard a very good one. It's by Joe Gibbia. And he is the CEO, founder of Airbnb. And he tells a story about how when, a few years ago, he was a starving worker in San Francisco, having a hard time affording his loft, even though he had a roommate. They just weren't making it happen. So they had this idea when a convention came to town to rent out an air mattress. And they were able to rent out the air mat. They made extra money. They thought, you know what? We could do this a lot. We get other people and get a piece of the pie, and we could really build this up. And he went and told a few other people about his great idea, and they thought it was a fantastic idea. So then they formed a business. And as soon as you form a business, what do you need? Customers. So they went out, and they couldn't find a single customer. What they found is people saying, what are you, crazy? You want me to let out my house so that people will come in and steal everything I have and mess it all up? Who knows? They're going to come back and rob me. I'm not going to do that. Only an idiot would do this Airbnb thing. And he said what happens is things got real good, and then things went real bad as they're looking for customers. And he said there's a period of time in a startup, it's called the trough of suffering. Now, a trough is what animals eat out of. It's the manger, or Jesus, same word. It's the trough of suffering. And he says, during this trough of suffering, you have to find out what is really going on in your customers' minds. He says, we had a great product, but the timing was wrong for our product. We had to wait for a maturity of the market before we could bring our product before it would take off. He says, but the trough of suffering is where startups go to die. They go in there and nothing is working out, and they just can't make it go. And they're so discouraged, what happens? They eventually just give up and say, I'm going to move on to something else. Unbeknownst to them, whatever else they pick also has a trough of suffering. Sometimes I find a trough of suffering in a marriage. People will say, well, we were so excited about getting married and everybody thought it was a fantastic idea, but after we started living together and after we started making our family together, it looks like an awful idea. It looks like a terrible idea. I'm thinking about getting out the trough of suffering. Now, what you have to do when you're eating from the trough of suffering is you have to stick it out. Eat of the trough of suffering. What is changing is not the other people. What is changing is not the circumstances. What is changing is your heart. Because God knows what the way you need to be in order to have where he is taking you. Because if he gives it to you too early, what will happen? It will fly right through your fingers like sand, right? You won't have it. I gave it to you, you couldn't hold on to it. During these times of waiting, allow the Lord to take hold of your heart and allow him to begin changing you into his image. Begin changing you the way he calls you to be in a very special, very unique way for the plan that he has for your life. Eat from the trough of suffering. When the time is right, you'll begin to see the product. You'll begin to see the productivity. You'll begin to see the rewards. The reward is not at the end. The reward is during the trough of suffering, the changes, the times of difficulties, the times where you're learning new lessons, where you're learning how I need to change in order to live with so-and-so, how I need to change in order to excel at this job, where I need to change in order to become the parent that God has called me to be, or become the child that God has called me to be, that trough of suffering. Now, there's something very interesting in this time of waiting, and it's that there's a reversal of fortune right here. There's a reverse of expectations, and that's that before Jesus, everybody was waiting for Jesus. But now that Jesus has arrived, there is now Jesus waiting for everybody else. And so the call of God upon our lives is this: Jesus is waiting. He is waiting for you. He is working in your life in all kinds of ways. As you've probably been eating from the trough of suffering, has Jesus been speaking to you and saying, here I am, here I am. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, he says, here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. What Jesus is saying is, I'm knocking at the door of your heart. If you let me in, I will have a relationship with you. And when I have a relationship with you, everything in your life will change. Everything will be transformed. You will find a new center to your life. You'll find a new hope for the future. Everything will change. Maybe Jesus is knocking at the door of your heart even now. Maybe you've been at the trough of suffering. Maybe he's been working. Maybe he's been bringing you closer and closer to him. I would say, if you are here today, it's because the Lord is working in your heart. And he is saying, let me come into your life. Give me the steering wheel of your life. Let me change your destiny from hell to heaven. And let me change you from the inside out. That's what Jesus' call is to each of us. Here in a moment, we are going to celebrate the lighting of the Christ candle. That's the big white one in the middle. And that represents Christ. And I'm going to share the flame for that Christ candle with somebody up here, and each of us are going to go back and light the candles behind us. But as that light goes back, I would invite you to receive Jesus. As you receive the light of Jesus into your heart and into your life. Let this be a moment where today changes everything in your life.